There are so many information gaps that need to be closed. In there, we collaborate a lot with the researchers in the institutions of higher learning to make sure that we fill up those gaps. Our vision is to be a world-class energy regulatory institution by the year 2020. And I'm going to walk you through what we are doing to achieve that vision, to realize that vision. I've put there 5 tenets of a world-class regulator. The first tenet is that a world-class regulator must be able to use evidence-based decision-making. We must base our decisions based on science and facts. And where we don't have adequate scientific evidence, we would like to use precaution. That's one of the basic fundamental tenets of a world-class regulator. This I got from the Environment Canada. It's also a regulator. Effectiveness, our regulations, we do have clearly defined objectives for the regulatory instruments. And we also look for clear outcomes. And this is actually the underlying philosophy of ZimAsset, that is the RBM approach. Our role in promoting research, I talked about information and knowledge. This we get from research institutions and the institutions of higher learning. We do have, and we encourage the signing of MOUs with research institutions. And I think at the moment we have one with SIRDC, we have one with the Research Council of Zimbabwe, and another one with the Standards Association of Zimbabwe. From time to time, we call for research proposals from institutions, and we fund selected research that meets our criteria. At the moment, our basic criteria is the realization of our ZimAsset mandate. If a project or a proposal is well aligned to our mandate as far as ZimAsset is concerned, we really prioritize its support. We go all the way out to see if we've got a few funds to support that. And I'm going to give you a breakdown of some of the projects that we've been involved in. From time to time also we experience problems in energy regulation, and we approach institutions with specific problems for them to solve for us. Instead of calling them to give us proposals, we actually go to them with our problems, and we engage, get into contracts, they carry out the work. Then we also facilitate stakeholder workshops where we share the outputs of the research with the various stakeholders. That is a list of some of the projects that we have been looking at in the recent past. And to the left there, we have put ZimAsset infrastructure, I've put ZimAsset outcomes and strategies. Energy and power supply fall under the infrastructure and value addition cluster. So those first 2 columns, they are showing the sector outcomes and the strategies as they are enunciated in ZimAsset. On the right there is, I've put the projects that we've got from various institutions, and I'm trying to align them to what ZimAsset say. Basically in ZimAsset, we're trying to achieve outcomes of reduced fuel imports. We're trying to encourage energy efficiency. We're trying to increase the use of alternative energy forms. So projects that meet that criteria actually get priority in terms of support from us. So, the first project there is, that's a fuel economy study by SRDC, design of bioreactors for synthesis of algae oil is feedstock for biodiesel production from Chinoi University of Technology, establishment of a solar thermal system test center by SRDC, assessment of the potential of solar and wind energy resources in Zimbabwe, using GIS by Chinoi University. Those are some of the projects that we've received, and we've tried to align them with the ZimAsset expectations in terms of outcomes and strategies. So those are the projects from the institutions and the alignment there. There are a number of them, I think upwards of close to 30 projects that we've received. I will show you those that we have, those have been approved and they are currently running or they are about to run. The design of a system to cure tobacco using solar energy by Chinoi University. Mobile Jatropha Kurkas multi-purpose processing plant by HEAT. And that's the cluster KRA in ZimAsset. Solar water heaters by UZ, fuel additive technology by an independent consultant. Okay, the list goes on. Those are some of the projects that we've actually completed. The ethanol blends fuel economy study by SRDC was completed. ethanol stoves performance assessment, SIRDC was completed. National Energy Efficiency Program was completed. Maybe just a case study, briefly. The National Energy Efficiency Audit study indicated that domestic and household usage of electricity constitute 31% of the total electricity that is generated, the use. And that is a very high percentage. You can actually see that it's higher than industrial usage. And we developed interventions resulting from that study, resulting from the outputs of that research, which involve lighting, improvements in heating and cooking, alternatives basically leaning towards more renewable energy forms. And those initiatives, if implemented, they will result in a 620 gigawatt hour per year savings in energy, which is about 22% of the total savings that can be realized from implementing those research findings and some of those interventions. The other study that we carried out with SIRDC involved the study of the efficacy of the ethanol cooking stove. Again, we're trying to promote the use of locally available renewable energy, ethanol. In this study, they were comparing the ethanol stove to the paraffin stove, to the electric stove, to the LP gas stove, to the ethanol gel stove. And the objective was to determine energy consumption, the cost of energy, efficiency, energy cost savings, fuel emissions concentrations, and the ethanol burnout. Just 1 minute, that was the methodology. Those were the results. From those results, it was actually determined that the ethanol stove, while not as good as the electricity stove or the LP gas stove, it was much better than the paraffin stove and the ethanol gel stove in terms of efficiency. And okay, those are the conclusions there. I'll jump to the recommendations. So one of the key findings from that research was that ethanol, while it is locally available, a renewable form of energy, it is also a dangerous form of energy, which needs to be handled carefully. We need extra care in handling it because it's volatile.
Thank you very much, RCZ, for giving us researchers an opportunity to input into this dialogue. As you can see, my topic really is collaboration and foreign collaboration. Fortunately, a lot of what I put down on my slides has already been explained or touched on by others. So I hope that I'll be able to make my presentation in only, you said 13 minutes.
3.
All right. So it's, all right. So a little background, some vignettes. I think it's important to get to grips with some statistics that relate to how much research is being conducted in Africa. This is World Bank statistics. In the USA, there are 4,650 biomedical researchers per million people, while in sub-Saharan Africa, excluding South Africa, there are 56 researchers per million people. In sub-Saharan Africa, we produce less than 1% of biomedical publications. And if you look at all the world literature, an African author is cited in 2.3% only. Now, you know, talking about the importance of research to this audience is really like preaching to the choir. But let me just show you 2 slides which imprint how important research is. And this is a recycled slide. I presented this some time back in 2010 at the World AIDS Conference at a plenary presentation, just to emphasize what antiretroviral therapy can do. And this again is taken from the Lancet, and this is the same individual here and there. This young man, who doesn't look very young in that picture, is being looked after by the mother, and he had very advanced AIDS. And because he got antiretroviral therapy, he is now healthy, holding his daughter. Now, this was way back in 2003 when when antiretroviral therapy was a novelty. Now, of course, we take it for granted. So that just shows you how powerful research is. Some of us were born before HIV/AIDS, and we saw the devastation that it caused. But within our own lifetime, we have seen how research has turned this disease to become really just a chronic illness. Again, Mr. Samkange talked about DART, and I was going to discuss this in some detail. This plot here shows you over a period of 5 years what happened to a cohort of people who were followed up without antiretroviral therapy, and this shows you a cohort of people that we followed in DART whilst giving them antiretroviral therapy. You have really 90% alive after 5 years, and you had only 8% alive after 5 years. Again, I mean, that's just, you know, it boggles the mind. Right. My research involvement is at the University of Zimbabwe Clinical Research Center, University of Zimbabwe, University of California, San Francisco Collaborative Project, and we also do collaborative research in the Department of Medicine. You were already told UZ-UCSF especially has been conducting research over the last 21 years, and I have been participating in that research over that period of time, and we've done what we would consider to be really impactful research, and we can count at least 75. And this is the area of research. Our main area of research is HIV/AIDS and the comorbidities, and we've done more than 70 collaborative studies, and different populations have been addressed. And these are the different countries, institutions in those countries that we have been collaborating with over those years. So that's pretty much most of the continents around the world. And I was going to emphasize the impact and the pivotal place of some of the research that we have done, but let me just single out one in the interest of time. There's one that's called HPTN 052. This is the first study in the world to show conclusively that antiretroviral therapy prevents HIV transmission. And in that study, the transmission prevention rate was 96% using antiretroviral therapy. And it was voted, the publication was voted as the Science Paper of the Year in 2011. And in Zimbabwe, we enrolled 240 couples out of 1,763 couples enrolled in 6 countries. I'll leave that out. This is another important study called the EARNEST study, and this is one of 3 international studies that demonstrated that a particular combination of drugs was successful in treating patients who had failed their first-line treatment. Now, people may appreciate that we put patients who have got HIV infection on first-line treatment. Unfortunately, after some time, they may fail that treatment, and they require second-line treatment. And often, it's difficult to choose a particular combination of drugs because there is so much and it's so expensive. It's often 10 times as expensive as the first line. So a number of studies have been conducted, one in Australia and the other one conducted in the United States. And we conducted the third one in a collaborative engagement with Malawi, Uganda, and we were able to show that a particular combination was good, and this has been adopted by the WHO. And there are many other benefits of collaborative work that go beyond science. Fortunately, a lot of these have already been mentioned by previous speakers, how we impact service delivery at the sites where we run our studies, how we improve infrastructure, and how we collaborate within the country itself and provide mentorship to some centers to develop them and capacity development. In addition, we employ a fair number of people, so we are an employer. We play a different role other than just providing scientific, just providing scientific data. Now, I do need to mention something about regulators. Right. So we appreciate that regulators make genuine attempts to address issues that researchers raise. I'm just talking about the relationship between regulators and researchers. And opportunities for dialogue have been availed. I have been fortunate that RCZ specifically has asked me a number of times to come and discuss issues with them openly, and I have been given that opportunity. I've also discussed issues with MRCZ and MCAZ, and that's indeed commendable. There are areas, however, that may need improvement. From the researcher's perspective, researchers need to better understand the regulatory requirements of any country, and here, of course, Zimbabwe. Seek out opportunities for relevant and timely dialogue with regulators. Whilst on the side of the regulators, the regulator should ensure a better understanding of research requirements to prevent delays and penalties, and appreciate that sometimes we operate also on the timetable of our collaborators. So there is, and to mitigate the frequent lengthy approvals which sometimes attract penalties. And one area that we've been in discussions, and I think it's important to mention it, is this specimen transfer agreements. And this has been mentioned before, and there are quite a number of sensitivities that are important. But we are engaging the RCZ specifically with collaboration with the other regulators to try and come up with responses to how we can take this forward. So in conclusion, Mr. Chairman, collaborative research is complementary to what one may call investigator-initiated research. And collaborative research can, as you have seen, be transformative. Although researchers and institutions have a choice whether to participate in collaborative research or not, there's really no choice. If you want to answer big and important biomedical research questions, you just have to think of collaborative research. Regulators are entrusted with a vital responsibility in research oversight. This must be appreciated and respected. Researcher-regulator communication is critical in striving to make each entity understand the other's mandate. Like all forms of communication, they can be improved with the right attitude and effort. Thank you.
Also going to dissect and cut my presentation to fit in with the time. Collaboration and working with others is really sort of the norm. And also the purpose of research, in a broader sense, is really to make sense of the past, to predict the future through, say, models, prediction, estimates and forecasting and so forth. Also to understand our place in the world as individuals and as communities, or even as nations. One of the reasons for doing research is to try to come up with solutions for the challenges and problems which we have or which we need to resolve. For example, coming up with the different technologies is really a way of trying to resolve issues and problems. The debate about reality could be philosophical, but it is actually a real thing. Then, of course, to find out how things really work or how things came to be. I know there are other disciplines of knowledge which seek out to how things came to be, but in essence, research is also a knowledge system of seeking how things really work. Now, once you have done your research, there is the research output, which is basically knowledge. And we hope that that knowledge is reliable, but there has to be a way of making sure that that knowledge is reliable. Usually the knowledge is documented and is publicized either as newsletters, bulletins, journals, books, and electronic media like websites, which I must say are not usually very reliable. So it's really the aspect of trying to come up with what we call reliable knowledge, which in fact is really the business or the obligation of reviewers and editors. So a review process is really, in a way of standardizing how research output is going to be made available to the public and to other researchers or to colleagues. So there are what we call unwritten rule books, and these rules are universal. It doesn't matter whether you're doing research in South Africa, in the United States, or we're doing research in Zimbabwe and so forth. One has to follow rule books. Reviewers, editors, and referees, they all look at the research output to see whether, in fact, it is complying with the rule books. It's very, very difficult for a lot of people, apparently, unfortunately, to keep to the rules, especially researchers. Some of the aspects of the rules are that research has to be original. All reviewers will look at originality. Just to say that originality does not mean necessarily something completely new or out of this world. Information which has been, or data which has been collected, gathered, and published for the first time, that is original. So originality covers quite a wide range of spectrum, and reviewers look into that. It has to be reliable and replicable. How do we do that? It has to be done through methods which have been tried and tested. You have got to validate the methodology. You've got to use methods which probably have been used by others and of course you refer to. And these methods have got to be so explicit that another researcher can be able to carry out the same research under the same conditions and come up with more or less similar results. Then there's the aspect of integrity. Integrity involves really coming up with what is genuinely yours. There's a lot of plagiarism which goes on, especially nowadays because of the use of the electronic media. It's very easy to cut and paste. It's very easy to copy and paste. And by so doing, you end up, in fact, plagiarizing. A lot of institutions now, for example, the University of Zimbabwe, you have to present your dissertations accompanied by a certificate of anti-plagiarism. Otherwise, it's not going to be looked at. That is very, very important. Integrity is there. Then there's citations. There is absolutely no way you can do a research without citing or without quoting other researchers. It's almost impossible to start something completely new from nowhere. So citations, those are the aspect of things which the reviewers look at. Then there's language. Language is very, very important. In our situations, but whether we like it or not, we publish in English. We do most of the work in English. And it has to be English, not Zimbabwean English. It's only in Zimbabwe, mind you, we've got cousin brothers and cousin sisters. And I'm sure the previous speakers, almost every one out of two of them have used the word actually. And that's okay in speaking, but in writing, you can't get away with that. They say that apparently there are only 5 countries or nations in the world who speak real English. That is, English is their first language. There's the United Kingdom, of course, Australia, New Zealand, the United States, and Canada. Those are the Anglophiles. Everybody else, we speak other language, of course, although we use English, but that's not really the best language. But even among themselves, they also debate about the right English to talk about. There's a saying that English was born in the United Kingdom, it was murdered in Australia and buried in the United States. It's because of the different ways they speak English, of course. Also, even in England itself, there is always different dialects and different ways of speaking English. Now, in research, there is a standard way of writing English. You can get away with the WhatsApp English or the cell phone English in speaking and talking, but in writing, it has to be really proper English. Incidentally, apparently, a friend of mine once was working in the UK, in East London. They speak what they call Cockney English. It's very, you can't even understand it. And it's also a very, very rough area. So he was a student doing teaching, practice teaching, and he said that one time apparently when you work there, they give you what they call injury money or injury allowance because you can be injured by the students. They are those sadra. So one of the students, he asked one of the students to spell the word murder. And the student says, "Oh, I'm sorry, I can't, but I can demonstrate it." Then there is the aspect of acknowledgement. You should always acknowledge really what things have done. These are the main roles of the reviewers. The reviewers have got to look at all those aspects of it. I have done a number of reviews for the RCZ, for the Research Council of Zimbabwe, but also have done review and editing journals for the past 20 years. Just to say that the last thing is that acknowledgement, as I say, is very, very important. I think with the exception of Professor Hakim and the gentleman who was representing the Minister of Finance, and the only two people who have acknowledged other people. And I don't believe that all these presentations are completely original without the help of other people. So, as a reviewer, that is unethical, apparently. So I want to acknowledge Professor Gevers of the Academy of Sciences of South Africa, ZAS, the Zimbabwe Academy of Sciences, and also the journal which I edit, the Journal of Applied Science in Southern Africa. Those are the three main sources I took some of the information I put there. Thank you.
Thank you very much. What I wanted to do was to pick a few technical products and services that were taken from labs to industry and share the experiences. But with 3 minutes, I'm not so sure how far I will go. By previous presentation, I was going to give a background on SEDIC, what were taken from labs to industry, experiences as we try to commercialize them, and then, of course, give some concluding remarks. By way of background, SRDC was created in 1993 through Research Act, and it has 12 research institutes, and its mandate is to carry out strategic research and development for the benefit of various sectors. And what is key is that our constitution provides for technology commercialization, and those experiences what I wanted to share with, but they are right at the bottom. This just gives you a framework of operations, and I'll rush through those slides because they are. In terms of our clientele, they include government entities. We also support, in terms of services, NGOs that are involved in development. We also work with local authorities, private sector, including individuals. And in terms of how we are organized, the 12 research institutes are there, and the various supporting departments are also given there. And let me show this slide that we've always shared with others. In terms of share of expenditure, in terms of R&D, the developed part of the world and African countries. And our Minister of Finance went to Ethiopia, I'm sure. That's the figure that is there. But essentially what we are saying is, on the African side, in terms of what we allocate for R&D, is very little. You look at our Zimbabwe there's a star. We calculate that on the basis of allocations and not necessarily disbursements. When you do disbursements, that percentage actually goes down very well. So we're saying that challenge is what affects also development. And that's why we are where we are in terms of various sectors. What we notice is when we have your proposal that has been successful, or a business plan that has been successful, it looks very nice on paper. But when you actually take it from that angle to actual implementation, there are a lot of issues that need to be taken into account. It's not as clear and straightforward as it is. There are twists and turns. And sometimes you always run into problems with various other players. For instance, when we do implementation, we then realize that in your planning you omitted a certain technical issue, or your budget was not sufficient, or it's not in line with the latest. What we have realized also is as you implement your projects, you then need to take into account the legal. I'm sure the various regulators were talking about, imagine you do your process, you budget everything, then EMA says you need to do it in EIS before you proceed. Or BTZ says so much. And that actually then affects the budgets. And essentially, you are almost back to zero. So what we are saying is, as you implement projects, you then need to have an implementation plan that is inclusive. And sometimes you also enter into territories where the existing players are against you. On the plan, it looks quite noble, but then there's competition. There's also skills flight, and that's an issue that you also need to take into account. Say the implementation plan, the actual plan, they are totally different. Then what we also observed is when we try to commercialize our products and services, we flighted in advert for calls for various players, the industrialists, bankers, and whatever. And we waited. We thought it was going to be high impact. Waited. And only one gentleman came without giving a name. And then we said, oh, are you interested in the project? He said, no, I'm not interested in the project. I want the real estate and the buildings. And when we said the project, those are not covered, he went for good. So it's not as obvious that when you have your R&D products, and if they are not well thought, they will be taken up, because sometimes you're also entering into territories. Then when you do commercialization, it requires capitalization. And we have realized that it's not easy. You go with a very nice business plan, all impressive in terms of data, pictures and projections, partnerships, but then the banker will say, no, we are not in our category in terms of funding. So at the end of the day, what do you do? And we realize that there's also Innovations and Commercialization Fund, which is looking for new projects, unlike other areas where they actually look on existing gadgets that need to be taken further. So again, it's a challenge that we also faced. Then in terms of policy support, the deliberate policy on commercialization was now picking up. I understand there were sentiments earlier on, say we need to take this in seriously. But again, it's slowly, and that's a challenge. And we are saying it's an issue, again, that also needs to be taken into account. Say, if I embrace what the key speakers at the beginning said, we need to take our things from the labs to industry. These are issues that we've tackled. We also realize that the issue of teamwork is very important. Teamwork across disciplines, teamwork across professions and experience. I understand there are learned people here. But again, what we are saying is when we are working in teams, sometimes you are a team member, sometimes you are a leader. Do you accept that role? Do you accept the smoothness in terms of achievements for results? And that's an issue that we almost face, even institutional, even across industrial players. Then what we also realize is, that sometimes the rate of delivery is different depending on the sector. Some can produce more products, some, and then at the end of the day, if resources are limiting, prioritization becomes a challenge. And then of course, the issue of utilization, paying attention to high tech. I think there was a story about biotech in other key. That's an issue that we now need to move with. When we went to school, maybe those things were not there, but those are the issues that are there. How do we then adapt so that then we match accordingly? Then of course, adapting to loss of critical skills. When you are implementing, you have the key person, the guy gets recruited elsewhere. What's going to happen in the project? You've already committed, you've already made an announcement, the commitment to the authority that we're going to deliver. And then we realize that that's a challenge. So you have to quickly, I don't know how you recruit and train and ensure that you ensure continuity. Then of course, sometimes you also need to make tough decisions. If a person is not playing his role as a team member, what do? Do you sacrifice the project? Do you change them? Do you remove them? And those are issues that also, again, you have to face when. Then of course, as I indicated, in terms of financing markets, there is no space for greenfield projects on the market. But the earlier sentiments were that we need to take our results to industry. And it's an issue that, again, we need to say, how do we? And then, of course, when we take these things to industry, there are issues that are very good in terms of job creation. And you also, as payments are made, there are also injections in the fiscus. And this whole process is good for everyone. But again, why are we ignoring it? It's a question that we have to discuss. Then, of course, we also had challenges in terms of outsourcing some key equipment. You go in terms of your priority, you are checking, you see something is worth 8,000. You say, we can make something for 2,000. But then you outsource the casing. The casing is charged 5,000. Even if you bargain, already what you are producing is already out of competition. And we realize that that is very common. And it's an issue, again, that we also need. And on the international scene, there are cases where products have been taken from labs, and those are some of the results that were given for science parks in Spain, science parks in China, and science parks in Chinese universities, and also those. And what we are saying, these are actually economic plays. Some are even listed on the stock exchanges, but they came from labs. And we are saying, are we challenged to also move that way? It's an issue, again, that we have to discuss. In the USA, the Bayh-Dole Act, which financed products that were developed by professors from universities to industry. And I'm told some of the key global players on the international scenes were actually products of that process. Our ICF is looking for greenfield projects. They actually took hardcore products. Are we going to consider that? It's an issue that, again, we have to discuss. In conclusion, I'm saying the economic potential of commercialized R&D output is quite substantial. It's up to us to get critical steps as and when. then ensure that, as earlier statements were given by Chief Secretary and also the Minister of Finance after touring Ethiopia, and then we were saying it's also possible that we can also think along those lines. Thank you very much with these few remarks.
Thank you very much. Sarah Sonabi, I'm the senior economist for the Bankers Association of Zimbabwe. Maybe firstly, I have to dispute that notion. Okay, basically what our expectation is bankers. As bankers, basically, we need to understand that bankers are more of intermediaries. We have people who want money and people who want to use the money. So basically what we find is that we need to take the money that we get from the people and lend it to where there is productivity. Therefore, increase the productivity with those people who are going to use the money will simply entail that our money will come back at the end of the day and we will be in a position to pay back the depositors. So basically what we are thinking about as bankers, what we expect really from research, is we're looking at research that actually increases productivity within the economy. Because as we increase productivity, if we think about the agricultural sector, of which we lend about 25% of our loan book, we expect that if the yields from agriculture actually increase, it simply means that the incomes that the farmers will get will increase, and that will increase also their capacity to repay the loans. So if the yields actually go down, and then at the end of the day, we find that the input that the farmers have put into agriculture is actually less than what actually they are coming out. It simply means that from the onset, that is becoming a non-performing loan. And then it simply means that it will actually lead to financial instability. Looking also at manufacturing, we were expecting that productivity within manufacturing, we need to see the manufacturing sector moving on, because basically that is our bigger customer. At the end of the day, once our customer has got enough resources, but is actually producing, you are simply meaning that the financial intermediation is being enhanced. But if the manufacturing sector, there's not enough productivity, there's not enough technology, there's not enough innovations, that would simply imply that we will not be in a position to recover the money that we have at the end of the day. Thinking of today, banks seem to be reluctant to be lending to SME sector, which is one of the critical sectors in the economy, and we have heard that the SME sector is now the new economy. But are the people within the SME sector producing the goods of the good quality? Is the quality really there? How can we enhance quality within the SME sector so that after some time we are in a position to move them from being informal to the formal? Once we move them from being informal to the formal, then banks have got the leeway now to start lending to that sector. So basically, looking at the banking sector, I simply said that we need research that really enhances productivity within the real sector. But also, we're thinking about how can we come up with new financial products. Financial products within the banks we need research in that area. How do we come up with new products? If we're thinking of SME sector, lending to an SME sector is different from lending to Econet or lending to Delta. Basically, they will need different products that have got different qualities from those that can be lent to current blue chip companies. So in that case, we find that as the Bankers Association, we think that we need to research. Thank you.
The Zimbabwe Miners Federation is the brainchild of the Minister of Mines and Mining Development, whose birth was marked to represent and contribute to the development and growth of the small to medium-scale miners. Now, this is a rough picture of the activities of small-scale mining in Zimbabwe, And of much great concern is where there is the Kadoma areas, which has got much activities. That's in Caesar River, and that was before and after. And now these are the people that I'm talking about. Now to rush through, I'm actually going to give in what is more important is the production details and the number that is involved in mining of, people that are involved in mining in Zimbabwe. Now these are production details that I'm very much interested in. We've got 25,000 people that are registered in terms of the Mines and Minerals Act, and 500,000 who are the artisanal miners. Now when I talk about 500,000, these are people that we call the illegal miners in Zimbabwe, and of which 2 million people actually depend very much on it. And then looking into production details, we had in 2004, 60% that was produced by small-scale miners, which was 17 tons. And then in 2005, it was almost a 50% situation with big mining operations. And now let's look at the whole output. From 2004, looking down through to, from 17 tons, gold plummeted production to 2 tons average. And to date, of course, we are now at 2 tons up to this month, September. And so what are the challenges? The challenge is that the government has not been actually looking at the activities of small-scale miners. It's an arm of government which has been given a cold shoulder. And if looking at comparatively with other countries, they've actually had policies that are in tandem with small-scale miners. Zimbabwe, according to the United Nations African Center for Mining Development, is the only country that still has got a mining policy that was crafted in 1963. And when I'm talking about 1963, there was no small-scale mining activities by then. So if you go to countries like Tanzania, actually when you've got a prospecting license, you can be allowed to mine. If you go to Kenya, again, you can be allowed to mine. So there are most of challenges which are being charged because of small-scale miners. They think there's a lot of money. Rural district councils, parks, EMA, and so forth. Now there's involvement in CID minerals. I think we, last week on Monday, we went to Mazoe area where there's about 6,000 people that are pining in that area. And we bumped into the police having arrested 2 people. And it was actually seen, the minister would see about 2,000 people in the mountain. They say, how come we've got only 2 people that we've arrested? So it's a situation where we are saying the police are actually benefiting from such kind of activities. Right. So that's gold rush, and you have heard about Kitsa, which had about 6,000 people, and so many activities that has happened, and that gold has not been going to government. Places like Vova, Karoi, Kazangara, Taka Forest, and out of all those, we can talk about plus or minus 40 kgs that is being recovered, which is going to the illicit market. So what is the problem? Is the issue of formalization. What is actually the challenge? Why is government failing to formalize? In 2013, the minister, Chinamasa, announced on the budget that there's going to be decriminalization of the artisanal miner, but this hasn't happened up to now. So it is issue of policies that need to be in tandem with the small-scale miners.
research could have been and should be, and will continue to be of vital importance in terms of informing the formulation itself. Besides